Welcome to this episode of the Cold Dead Hands podcast with your hosts, Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow and resident firebrand Brett Cross. Sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy as they bring you the stories told from the cold dead hands.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Stories from the Cold Dead Hands, a radio show dedicated to uplifting the voices of those who have been silenced. Too often, the media focuses on the perpetrators of these acts of violence. This radio show tries to give voices to those who were taken far too soon. I am one of your hosts. I'm Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow. I'm one of the foremost recognized gun experts in the world, having published on things like health and well-being related to firearms, as well as the social determinants of firearm ownership, as well as gun policy support. In other words, why do people own guns and why do they support certain policies? My co-host tonight is Brett Cross.
I'm Brett Cross. I lost my son in Uzziah, or I lost my son Uzziah in the Robb Elementary School shooting in May 24th, 2022. And since then, I have been fighting to make sure that his legacy it remains and outlives everyone, because too often we hear about the perpetrators of these acts and the infamy in which they receive, and we don't hear enough about the victims.
Yeah. And tonight we have two special guests. Lonnie and Sandy, you want to introduce yourselves a little bit and say, why you're here with us?
Go ahead, Lonnie.
Well, we're Sandy and Lonnie. Our daughter was killed in the Aurora Theater shooting coming up on 13 years ago now. And our first response to a mass shooting was Sandy Hook, which we flew to Sandy Hook to meet with the survivors there to see if we could do for them what wasn't done for us. So when this happened to us, we had no one to help. We didn't know what to do. And so we ended up, rather than running away and hiding, and we decided to fight. And so we have been to 14 public mass shootings since the one that we went to help survivors.
Actually, I think it's 18, but that's okay.
Well, we counting
Anyway,
hours and Sandy. And
yes, and we've sent other people to those that we couldn't go to because so many of them have been back to back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like Uvalde, we were in Buffalo when Uvalde happened, and all of a sudden, I was talking to a survivor from Buffalo who had put his daughter into one of the freezer compartments to try to save her. And my phone started blowing up, and it was the news about Uvalde. So we left the next morning for Uvalde. And the bookends of Sandy Hook happening 5 months after our daughter was taken, and then Uvalde being the last one that we have personally responded to, really did me in. We know enough about what happened in Sandy Hook, and we know enough about what happened in Uvalde that a lot of people will never know. And if they did, they'd be as appalled as we are and as crippled by it as we all should be.
You would hope.
So,
Before we
Another
go too
thing
much further, before we
Go
get too much further, Lonnie, you mentioned we decided to fight, and that led to the creation of what I think is one of the most important of these groups. Do you want to talk about Survivors Empowered?
sure. Survivors Empowered was started because we didn't get the support that we really needed after Jesse was killed. So we decided that we would start responding to mass shootings and giving those people the support that they needed, peer-to-peer support, which we know is incredibly important. When we can get to survivors early on and let them know, first of all, you're going to survive this whether you want to or not. And believe me, right afterwards, you wish you would just die. You just wish that you could be in the place of your child or your loved one. So we put together a toolkit We worked with the Giffords organization to put a toolkit together that is free to anyone who has been on the receiving end of gun violence. That is very helpful, and it lists lots of resources. And then we also do retreats for survivors of gun violence, and we teach them mindfulness and how to handle their trauma and manage it, so that they can go on in a more productive way in society. So that's our main mission. But we also work on gun laws when appropriate. We're trying to repeal the PLACA law, which is the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, so that people have an ability to receive justice in the courts.
Yeah. And Lonnie, I know you wanted to say something a second ago before I cut you off.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out when she said bookends, what that means. When we first were, the first thing that happened to us that we were accosted by these people that want to say that your daughter didn't exist, that this was a sham put on by the federal government to take our guns. That was the first thing that happened. Of course, anybody we talk to don't believe that's ever going to happen. But that was a shock. That was another trauma. And then we had a company that collected $5 million, a local charity in Denver collected $5 million using the faces of the slaughtered victims. And we're not going to give us the money. They said their charter only let them give to other charities. Well, we didn't let that stand. We went to the press. We had a press conference. We got the governor involved. We had to get state senators involved, and to make them relinquish the money that they collected on the faces of our children. And that's happens almost every place. Every mass shooting is the same in a lot of ways, and in a lot of different ways.
Very different.
They're very different. But we call them the bookends because slaughter of children in the beginning in Sandy Hook was one of the worst massacres ever happened. 10 years later, the slaughter of the children in a school was the same type of killing, except this one was worse. 10 years, nothing happened to stop it. Couldn't get automatic weapons even regulated, and and we have very few wins in legislature. We do get some states to, well, Colorado, for instance, did pass background checks right after Aurora.
And they repealed PLACA.
And they repealed PLACA recently through 5 years effort on our part, because we sued the gun owner and we got taken.
Not gun owner, the
gun seller of the ammunition. So when we went to court, PLACA, the judge threw it out because of PLACA. So we didn't get a chance to point out the egregious things that this ammunition seller was doing. So,
this online dealer sold 4,000 rounds of ammunition to our killer and lots of other equipment. But because our case was thrown out, and all we were doing, we weren't suing for money. We were suing for him to change his business practices. Well, he didn't have to do that because it was thrown out. So years later, the Texas shooting at Santa Fe High School happens. Turns out he sold, the same owner sold the ammunition to that underage killer. They were able to sue him because
he broke the law.
He broke the law, the federal law of selling ammunition to an underage person. So this same man, whose name is Jordan Mollenhauer, he owns Lucky Gunner. And that same man is now on the State Board of Education in Tennessee, was assigned that position by the governor of Tennessee. And when the Covenant shooting happened in Tennessee, the school shooting there, very quietly at midnight, they passed a PLACA law so that those parents have no recourse whatsoever and he goes blithely on his way, still selling ammunition and who knows what else to people that shouldn't have it.
Yeah, that's just wild. Why don't we take a step back and why don't you talk about Jessie? Like who she was, like what was she like? Let's give her a voice.
Jessie was 23 when she moved to Denver, and she was studying. She was going into journalism, and she wanted to be a sports journalist and wanted to cover hockey. And luckily for us, she was incredibly talented and was able to get some really great internships in Colorado, in Denver, and was doing quite well for herself. And a friend of hers from Texas came to visit her and help her move into her new apartment. And he was like a brother to her. He's still very, very close to us. He's like a second son to us. And he's a big Batman fan. And Batman was opening, The Dark Knight was opening that night. And it was his last night in town. So she decided she was going to take him to the premiere. And she didn't come home. From what we have been told and through the trial and what Brent has been able, the young man that was with her has been able to share with us, when the gunfire started, he knew what it was, and they stood up to try to get out, and she was hit. The first of 6 shots hit her in the thigh, went through her leg and into her other leg, and she collapsed and said, "I've been hit." What he didn't know is that she had been hit 3 more times in the abdomen, 1 time in the clavicle. And he was just trying to stop the bleeding in the thigh. And she was, of course, screaming for people to call 911. And then all of a sudden she was quiet. And he looked up and saw that most of the left-hand side of her head was gone. And he had the composure to move from her because he's a paramedic and he knew that she could not survive that wound, and moved over to across the aisle to some seats that where if the shooting started again, because by this time the shooting had stopped, and he thought that the shooter was just reloading, and he thought, if I can get to the rail, that if he starts shooting again, I can jump from here and maybe survive. Now, mind you, he had also been shot at this point, but didn't realize how bad it was. While he was sitting there waiting to decide to jump or not, he actually called us from inside the theater. And I had been on the phone texting with them just a few minutes, about 20 minutes before this happened. And when the icon came up that it was him, I was like, okay, they're at the movies. Why is he calling us? And took the call and I said, "Hey, baby, what's up?" And I could hear the screaming in the background. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "There's been a shooting. It's random." And I knew, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I think I've been shot twice." And I knew at that moment something was really wrong, because Jessie would have been calling me if she could. And I said, "Where's Jessie?" And he said, "I'm sorry. I tried." And that realization that she was hurt badly, at least. And I asked him, I said, please tell me she's not dead. And he said, I'm sorry. And that's when I let out a scream that
So I
woke him
was
up.
sound asleep when all this was going on. When I heard that scream, I immediately was wide awake. I thought somebody had broken into the house and was attacking her with guttural, horrible scream that didn't even sound like her. When I got to her, she was sliding down the wall saying, Jesse's dead. Jesse's dead. I took my hand and I grabbed her and took her to the couch and asked her how that she possibly know that. She said, because I just talked to Brent and he was there and he's been shot. And Brent's a paramedic and I know she's dead. Well, when those words came out, I knew that she was dead and that my wife would never be the same and my daughter was gone. So that was the day our life changed forever.
And you know, here it is over 12 years, 12 and a half years. And it's still unbelievable. It just doesn't seem real, and yet all too real at the same time. So we sat there. I mean, I called my son and he came over and he said, you're not going to Denver. I'm going to Denver. And he went to Denver. We stayed behind and we just sat there. We still, to this day, have never been notified by anyone from Denver that our daughter was killed. We know she was. We saw the reports. We know she was murdered. We know her wounds. The awful wounds. We know all of this, but we sat there and waited until we had confirmation from my son at the mortuary. Thank God he didn't have to identify her body because of the color of her hair and a tattoo that she had that was written in my handwriting. So those are the things that we carry with us every day and why we respond to these other mass shootings, because we know what those people are going through and what hell they're going to be living the rest of their lives. And we want to give them the ability to know that they're not alone and that in time they will laugh again. And in time they will find a semblance of joy, but it's never the kind of life that they thought they were going to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you hit on something important there, because I don't think anyone that hasn't experienced this could ever understand what this is or what it's like, right? It is unfathomable, right? To imagine you'd send your kids somewhere, to school, to a movie theater, to a grocery store, a park, a parade, and something like this would happen. And yet this is everyday life in America.
Yes.
The other thing that Lonnie mentioned, I do want to touch on just a little bit because it's relevant in the news, is the idea of the false flag, right? The idea that you've made this up, right? I've seen this with Brett. Like, Brett and I go live on like TikTok together all the time, and people come on and say, your son didn't exist, right? And this goes back to Alex Jones, right? He started these kind of like talking points with Sandy Hook, and
he started. Wait. He actually started it with us from
Ah.
Aurora.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He came after us way before, 5 months before Sandy Hook. And I still have nightmares about what he said to us and what he did to us to this day.
So I don't know if you know it or not, but we had a face-to-face with Alex Jones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would have maintained my composure. I'm gonna have to, like, if you did not punch him in the face, I'm gonna have to applaud you right now.
Well,
You have to applaud him, but the only reason he didn't was because I stepped in between the two of them.
I almost pushed my wife down when she was trying to pull me off of the guy, but
I
you know,
I don't know that I could restrain myself.
Yeah, he told us that at one point he said, between the 1776, yelling and screaming. At one point he said that Jesse never existed. We worked for the administration and it was all a false flag. And then he told us that Jesse was living in the Bahamas. So it was like, okay, which reality are you going to go with here? Either she's never existed or she's living in the Bahamas. Which one is it? Because let me tell you, I take either one of those to just know that she was safe and sound, whether she never existed in her world of energy is safe and protected and she'll come in some form somewhere down the line, or she's living in I'll take living in the Bahamas. I'll go visit her anytime.
Yeah.
But the audacity for him to say that to two parents in face to face.
To say it to anybody, right? But I bring it up because the Onion has bought
Yeah.
InfoWars.
Yes.
Like, how ironic is that, right? Like,
pretty cool.
And every town helped fund it, which I thought was also very interesting.
Yes.
So I could not think of a better karma, right? Like, I make the joke that the content doesn't change, but now there's a disclaimer.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is a few years ago, somehow, and I don't even remember how it happened, but his ex-wife Kelly and I made contact and and ended up becoming friendly on social media and still chat from time to time. So
Is she sane though? She seems sane.
yes, she is, and fighting hard for the sake of her children, and she's going through her own hell because of him.
I mean, yeah. Like, he's the lowest of the low, right? Like, the fact that he ever entered into mainstream media at all, like, it just
The fact
that's an
that we
indictment.
have, I think the sad part, and Lonnie and I talk about this a lot, that what's so sad is that people listen to it initially laughing at it. The Rush Limbaughs, the Alex Jones, all those guys on the far right, Steve Bannon. They started listening to it originally laughing at it and then got sucked into it for whatever reason. And it just is heartbreaking to see our country believe that kind of baloney.
Yeah.
You know what I really wanted to say there, but
I mean, we're in the
You can.
SEC regulation, so you can say whatever you want to say.
the bullshit of it all.
I mean, that's why it goes on. The show goes on at 9 p.m. Eastern, so that we are free from regulation. We are not. We're
Okay.
in the primetime television slot.
Well, and Sandy and Lonnie, y'all know my mouth, right? So y'all know it. There had to be little regulations on it because
Well, I remember having breakfast with you not too long ago where there were a lot of F words flying around from both ends of the table.
I mean,
always.
I'm a sailor. I'm just going to say that right now. Okay.
So, Brett, do you want to tell the story about what happened while we were at breakfast?
Which one? There a lot of stuff happened at breakfast.
With the two guys walking in with, yeah.
Oh yeah, they were they had their badges and their guns and everything sat down right beside us, and everywhere else is open in this place. They were trying to intimidate. Like that's what they were trying to do.
Well, what was so strange to me, and here we are from Texas as well. They walked in with T-shirts on that or golf shirts on that had badges printed on the golf shirts. So anybody can have that done. So how real is that? and they're loaded Glocks on their hips. And it was like, who the hell are these guys? And, why are they walking in here and, pretending that they're somebody that it felt so, well, first of all, I don't tolerate that kind of shit. It's like when I see it, we get up, we walk out, screw you. Even if the bill isn't paid, you go get it from somebody else or you come chase me down in the parking lot because that's not okay with me.
Right.
And why should I sit where I feel like I could be shot? Yeah.
I
I'm
like
here to
and
have breakfast.
and that's an everyday thing. Like we see that in the Capitol as well. Like when we went
Oh,
to
yeah.
testify, some guy sat right beside us. Some guy who I have beef with in person and online. His name is CJ Grisham.
Oh, God. Oh,
Yeah,
God.
CJ. Yeah.
Oh, my God. From Austin, Texas. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yep. So
Yep.
he came and sat down right beside me and Nikki, with his loaded gun and his American flag shoes, thinking he was just the cock of the walk. But yeah,
I
it's
make fun of Gravy Seals, right? I will laugh at their ass. I will call them a dumbass. Like it does not faze me at all.
the
I
funny
wish
part
I
is
could say, yeah, I wish I could say it doesn't faze me. It does make my gut wrench. It just tightens up and um, even in Colorado where they're not allowed to bring their guns in the Capitol, they dress in a way that is trying to intimidate and trying to aggravate, and they will try to get you to respond. And it's everything I've got to not do so.
so I'm still in my like live laugh toaster bath phase where it's just like I
I was
will
wondering who would make it.
yeah, I got it. Where you know how it is, right? After you lose your child, you don't care. Like the first 5 seconds, we talk about this all the time. When I wake up, I'm like, fuck, I woke up. I didn't want to wake
Mhm.
up. So I'm
Yeah.
still in that like stage, still, almost 3 years later. So yeah, and this is not wise, but I intentionally start running my mouth to people. It's not wise, but I still have that like, well, if I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go out, fighting for Uzi, and there is no better way, So, but I will say this: after reading y'all's handbook, the Survivor Toolkit,
Okay.
I gotta say it has some of the best shit in there. Like I wish I would have seen at the time. Um, because I remember you calling me one day, and you were like, is there anything that we can add? And I was just sitting there just reading through it and reading through it. And I'm like, make sure that somebody that like make sure to remind people to charge their phone or to charge their phone for them. I'm like, that never crossed my mind. Make sure that people drink. Make sure that the people that suffer these things take a shower. These are
Yeah.
all things that like for the first week, like I can say I don't remember showering for that first week. I know I didn't eat, and it's all things that really would have helped. And I cannot like endorse that enough because I have read
Yeah.
it and it is just the greatest help, just period.
There's no better compliment than that, Brett. Thank you.
Well,
We worked really hard on that. So, and getting, we're just two people in our little organization and a volunteer executive director and some other volunteers that help us along the way when needed. So to get Giffords to say yes, because we went to another organization early on and said we need to develop this, and they were like, no, we don't need to do that. That's not important. Da 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 da. So years later, we go to Giffords and we said, would you be interested in partnering with us on this? And they said, absolutely. And it lives live on Survivors Empowered website and on theirs. So, and it's free to anybody who needs it. So,
And it gets updated regularly.
yeah.
Well, and that's why like I really admire your organization, right? Like because as you said, and as Brett said, like there are no resources, right? There are no resources if you go through this, even though it has been a regular part of our lives since '99 with Columbine. There are no resources to help prepare somebody for how to get through this, how to actually survive
Yeah.
going through this.
What
And
to expect.
yeah,
Yes.
your organization attempts to cover those grounds and offer those resources, and so that's why I'm really excited to have you here tonight, so that people who may not have known about you can find you.
Yes.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and like I just pulled it up again, just to look through it and kind of talk about it. And first of all, it starts off just, I mean, it's real. There's no fluff, there's no, glorifying anything, all the things that surround gun violence that happens. Like I'm reading page 8, what trauma feels like, and you go through shock. Then there's the, bargaining and anger, grief and emotional pain, all of these things. Like managing demands and publicity. Y'all even talk about how the media will come in and try to take advantage of you, and how to, navigate through that, because when these situations happen, your world is completely flipped upside down, turned inside out. You don't know left from right, up from down, black from white. Everything that you knew has just became unraveled, where nothing makes sense. And for this toolkit to be here to help, especially, those first few days I wasn't reading anything, right?
Yeah.
And I wish, somebody in my family would have gotten access to this to help, because it is so important to keep somewhat of your sanity intact.
Well, Brett, what's so interesting is that when we respond to these shootings, we go in and our first goal is to try to get to survivors as quickly as possible. In your case, the FBI was all over it and we couldn't get anywhere close to you. However, comfort dogs could get to you.
Mm-hmm.
Billy Graham's or Franklin Graham's, I don't know which one it is, but the whole religious thing could get to you. Red Cross could get to you,
Yep.
but survivor to survivor support couldn't get to you. And that is wrong. And we have been trying and trying and trying through the federal government, much like the FEMA, to be able to respond immediately and give back to the community what they really need, which is not blankets, it's not teddy bears, it's knowing somebody who has actually lived through this and can help. And it's so important to be able to take your hand in mine and say, I do know what you're going through. I have walked in your shoes. I have walked the same path. I can give you some strength. I can give you some hope. And that is the
Yes.
most important thing that we can do to any other survivor of gun violence.
And that's what I was going to say, because, when we had our, the day after they opened up the Fairplex to the Red Cross, into this place, into that place, and everything. And then you go in there, first of all, you're overwhelmed anyways. And then they want you to fill out the same shit over and over and over. And
Yep.
I just wanted, I have issues with that. They need to, when they implement these things, you need to fill out one piece of paper and they spread it out to everyone. And then,
Absolutely.
right. But
Yes.
I needed some, I didn't need that. I needed somebody that, like you just said, that is like, look, this is the worst day of your life. It's not going to get any better, but we can manage it. And I would
Yes.
have, at that time, I might have called you crazy or whatever, like, how does it, how do you manage this? But it is so needed. It is so needed.
I met a mother from Parkland, well, a mother and a father, but met a mother at Parkland, and we were over at their house really early on, like the second day. And they said they had all kinds of family there and all kinds of people around. And they said, would you come into our bedroom and talk to us? And we went into the bedroom. We thought maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes with them. We were there for 2.5 hours. And the first thing I said to her is, I know exactly how you were feeling this morning when you woke up. And she looked at me and I said, you woke up saying, why am I still here? And my child is gone. And she just, I mean, her eyes were like this big in her head, just like, oh my God, that's exactly what I was feeling. They said, I know. And I said, guess what? I still have mornings that I feel that to this day. And that will be something you carry, but you're going to survive this, even though you don't want to. And she still tells me to this day that was the best information she was given early on, to know that, okay, I don't have a choice. And like I told her, you don't have a choice in this. You're going to wake up every day, and you don't want to, but you're going to. And you have said the same thing to me, Brett.
Yeah.
You wake up every morning and go, why the hell am I still here?
Well, I mean, and to add on to that, right, that is something that society does a real shit job with to begin with, because we are not prepared to lose our children, right? We are prepared to lose our parents, our grandparents, all of the older generations, right? And when it comes to a child, we're not prepared for that, even though there are accidents and other things that could take our children from us, right? But it's especially poignant when it's something like this. There is nothing there. And that's why I think like what you all do is super important, especially since we are now living in an age where this can happen to any one of us at any time. There are people now from Sandy Hook that have now experienced 2 of these events in their lifetime, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whereas it used to be the idea that you experienced one.
And Parkland as well.
Yeah.
The younger generation is really suffering from this epidemic of gun violence. It's not unusual for them to be in 2 shootings in their young lives.
Well, we've had 2
And
in Tallahassee, right? So like we had one on campus back in 2016, and then immediately after Parkland, we had another at a yoga studio here, right?
Yep.
So like we even here in Tallahassee, which is a small city where we only have like 150,000 people, we've experienced 2 in recent years.
I met one of the survivors' fathers from the yoga studio, not in person, but over the phone. And he was remarkably, I think he might have been an attorney, but he was doing very well for what he was experiencing. And I've lost track of him over the last couple of years because, gosh, there are so many. But he was honoring his daughter. He had started a foundation of some sort.
You talking about Fred?
No, not Fred Gutenberg. I know Fred.
Yeah.
But this was the yoga studio, yoga studio shooting.
So her name was Mara.
That's it.
Yeah. Because she was one of my very first students at Florida State University. And the other person that killed was a professor here.
Yes.
So both of the victims were associated with the college.
Yes.
Yeah. So like I teach a course at FSU called Guns and Society. And that was the second time I taught it. The first time I taught it was the semester Parkland happened. And then I taught it again in the fall, and the yoga studio happened.
Maybe you need to quit teaching that.
It's all your fault.
I'm just saying, man, like
it's the only way to get any education about this out there, right?
That seems a little coincidental, man.
Like wild.
Yeah,
wild.
it excuse me. Yeah,
I'm going to
it's
let Lonnie talk for a while with you all. I'll be right back.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So no, again though, this is information that like people need because, you know, most of the organizations focus on the lobbying, right? Like the trying to change the laws, which that's important. That's super important. But what are we doing to help the individuals that are dealing with it right now, right? That are trying to come to terms with it right now. Because like I said, society does a shit job at preparing us for losing our kids from, anything as it is. And it's even worse when it comes to guns and gun violence.
So yeah, you're right about the big orgs going after policy. But what it really boils down to, when we went to work for Brady early on, we tried to get them. Well, hired as outreach to survivors, and we found out that they hadn't been reaching out to survivors. There was many that was on their rolls that they never had been called. They wanted to help and wanted to do things, but they didn't have anything for them to do. Uh, and they would take names, but they just didn't have a program. And we saw a fault there, that the big organized, they do these studies and they do these white papers, and they do these programs and campaigns about family fire and bad apple gun dealers, but they really don't do anything to help survivors at all. And they end up being more focused on raising money um, than ending this epidemic that's killing all of our children.
Yeah. 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 It's terrifying, right? Like for any parent today to drop their kids off at school because, it's become so commonplace that, it's like, is it today that, this is going to happen? My co-author says that she's grateful that her kids are at 3 different schools. So there's at least a chance that 2 of them will come home if something like this happens. Right. Like how fucked up is it that that's the thought that goes through somebody's head? Right. That
Yeah.
at least I don't have to worry about losing all my children at one time.
Because they're in 2 different schools.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and that's why like I said, I have my favorite groups, right? Like we all have our favorites. Y'all are in my favorites. Um, because of we all have different roles. We've talked about this. We all have different roles. Y'all's role is one of the most important, if not the most important, because whether or not like I get laws changed or if I go and do some crazy stunt or whatever to draw attention back to Uvalde or anything like that, that can or cannot change something. The fact of the matter is that more children are going to die. More parents are going to have to suffer. And y'all have always been there and will continue to be there through Survivors Empowered. So no matter what, like it doesn't change because y'all know that y'all are making an impact, and truly do.
Thank you. We had a retreat here down here in Mexico. Brought a group of people who had been affected by gun violence. And there was one woman her brother was killed 30 plus years ago. And after the retreat, she wrote, she said, I've done 2 things that have been remarkable for me to participate in gun violence prevention. And she's been active the whole 30 plus years. And she said both of them concerned you and Lonnie and Survivors Empowered. And she said one was the Denver Accord that we did with GVpedia in Denver several years ago. And she said the other one was this retreat. And she said she got back to her home. She went back into intensive trauma therapy. She backed off of the work that she was doing to focus on her own healing and her own ability to deal with her grief that had not really been dealt with for 30 years. So that was for me, and for I think for Lonnie as well, that one endorsement, if you will, that one experience from her perspective meant the world to us, because we know that we changed her life in those 2.5 days that she was here. And how wonderful is that? We'd like to make them 3-day retreats. So we're hoping to raise enough money in the future to continue to do them and expand them. And to do several during the year, to do one a quarter at least. So 4 times a year would be lovely. And we'd like to do one of those at least in the United States.
Right. Yeah. And that, with that retreat and everything, and I'm also reading more of this. Every time I read it, I see something new that I didn't see the
Oh.
first time. So I'm loving it. But y'all also advocate for like therapy and everything too, which has
Mhm.
been a a lifesaver for me and for Nikki, right? We didn't handle anything well at all. That first year was so just turbulent.
Brutal.
Yep. Yeah, in the public eye, in our private lives, because we couldn't, it was we're both grieving and everything like that. And so that is one of the main things that I focus on too, is like mental health, and I don't think enough places even speak about that too, because mental health is so stigmatized, especially for men, and
Yeah.
that's why you don't see so many fathers out there. I
And
think I literally know every single father in gun violence prevention. Like, I think I know every single one, and I can list them on my hand, me included, and
and
so
let me tell you, out of those, well, those 5 are different than the hundreds that we have met along the way. But I will tell you, because of the stigma, you are right, men don't engage in therapy readily. And they tend to self-medicate, over drink. They drink excessively. We see a rage that, because they over medicate, or self medicate, or over drink, or whatever habit it is,
yeah,
we see this rage that is just underneath the surface, and it eventually takes its toll. um,
absolutely. I
and
also
it's
think,
avoidable, which
oh
is
yeah,
sad.
absolutely. I also feel, and Lonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a reason why there's not a whole lot of dads in the fight, right, is because you have to be vulnerable. And since men's mental health is so stigmatized, and oh, if you're vulnerable, then you're a girl, or you're this, or you're that, stuff that we've been told, for decades, right? That's why men don't do it. That's my opinion, anyways.
Well, that's absolutely correct. Men have a tendency to compartmentalize their anger, and they come in spells. Most men take it out uh, in anger. They go through that particular uh, phase, and it hardly ever goes away, because, when I was in the same courtroom with a killer, I mean, it was just, I had thoughts all the time about, how should this guy go on living? Sitting up there smirking in the courtroom, and my daughter is mutilated. Uh, no. So it is hard for men, and men are strong, and I have to take care of my wife. I have to, and I went to counseling with her, and it helped me, but I had an excuse. I got to be there for my wife, but at the same time, I was getting help, but I didn't have to admit that I was weak. And it definitely, and you see men at these functions, and moms demand action. We don't have men's demand action, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, and
I
I've
talk
given
about that all the
talks.
time.
Yeah, well, I've given talks at Mom's Demand and Students Demand, but you're right. There's no Dad's Demand, right? Like that doesn't exist. So,
Well, and it's not in GVP though. I mean, think about it. Like, Moms Against Drunk Driving. It wasn't Dads Against, because we have to be vulnerable. And like you just said, Lonnie, like, oh yeah, it started with, oh, I'm helping, but then, you got help. And I think that is one thing that we truly need to start focusing on, because it is important. But also you said something that I think about a lot, and that is, you were able to face Jesse's killer in court. I get asked sometimes, is it easier for me that our shooter is dead and I don't have to see it or anything? And I don't know if I think that we got off easier in that aspect, because I don't know if I could have done court. Like
You absolutely did.
I would have.
It's tough.
The trauma of going through a trial, the additional layer of trauma of going through the trial, we wanted it to just be pleaded out and move on. The majority of the other families did not. They wanted a trial. They wanted the death penalty. And we knew instinctively, I think we knew that you can't get 12 people to agree on where to go to lunch, much less, are you going to give the death sentence to someone?
Well, they wanted to plead guilty for life imprisonment. That's exactly how the trial ended. Yeah. But it cost $10 million, because the DA wanted to get elected governor. That's basically what happened. It's a political thing. So, we know that to us, he's the instrument that killed our daughter. There are a lot of reasons that he got in front of that audience with that gun. It's a lot of failures in our society to stop it. His psychiatrist didn't stop it. The ammunition dealer didn't stop it. The guy that sold the guns didn't stop it. And each time he didn't get stopped, it emboldened him to go through with it. He was begging to get stopped.
He wanted to get stopped, and nobody stopped him.
So our whole society, we can't just blame him.
No.
I mean, he's the instrument that did the killing, and there are people out there that's going to continue to do that. They want to be noticed, or whatever the reason, they want to go out in a blaze of glory. And they do these things. And most of them are young men that their brain hadn't completely matured.
Yeah.
So that's generally just a guy that wants to rack up points and kill as many people as he can. He has no soul. He has no heart. He's evil.
Our killer played music in his headset. He played music so he wouldn't hear the people screaming as he shot them.
Yeah.
So he planned this out so meticulously. And part of that was, he was far from insane. He was diabolical.
All this out in the trial.
Yeah.
All this came out in the trial.
And that is the good thing that came from the trial, is that we were able to get answers that we would not have been able to get otherwise. However, could I live easier without that knowledge? Probably. And the outcome would have been the same. And the good thing is the DA who wanted to make a name for himself still didn't get elected governor. So here's that. Here's to that.
That's awesome. And yeah, I'm saying, when I say that, like, I feel I get off easy, because I would mess trial up. I know that I would, because you would
have got kicked out.
Yeah, you would have been banned from the courtroom early on, day one.
Oh, absolutely. Cause I would hop whatever barrier it is, because,
many of us had that thought, let me tell you. And the killer's parents came to court every single day. They had an escort into the courtroom. They got a private parking place. They got to go through security first, and they got to sit before the courtroom opened. They got to sit in a private area to read their Bible, and were escorted into the courtroom before anybody else was allowed to come.
Yeah, we've seen something similar to that with the cops here. The cops get all the special treatment and everything. The one thing that I don't like,
the cops who did nothing.
Yeah.
The cops who did nothing get special treatment.
Oh, absolutely,
What
100%.
is wrong with our
It's called
society?
protective custody.
Yeah, and our community is all for it. They're all for it. But the one thing that does irritate me is that, like y'all got a lot of that extra information and everything.
Yes,
Some that y'all wish y'all didn't have, but some that you're glad that you had, right?
yeah,
We won't ever
ever
get
have it.
that.
No,
And ours has so many missing parts and
parts,
pieces
pieces, absolutely.
that I wish that we would. Like that is the only reason why I would ever want that piece of shit alive, is so that we could have a hearing so that we could get that information.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to.
Real
So
quick.
it's a double-edged sword. You don't have to go through the trial, which is so traumatic and so awful. And the other side of that is you don't get the answers to the questions that you really deserve answers to.
Yeah, real quick, I
Yes.
want to be cognizant of the time. I know Brett said that you all like an hour was probably enough. We are approaching an hour. I will stay on here for another hour if y'all want to, but like just want to like make y'all cognizant of the time.
How are you feeling, Lonnie? You good?
Yeah, I mean, we have a conversation.
We'll stay on a little longer.
Perfect, perfect. Let's do a quick reset then. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow. Welcome to Stories from the Cold Dead Hands, a radio show where we uplift the voices of the victims who we lost in these mass tragedy events. My co-host is Brett Cross.
Yeah, I'm Brett Cross. I lost my son in the Robb Elementary School shooting. And since then, I continue to fight to make sure that Uzziah's name is remembered and that the world will be changed for a better place because of him.
And tonight we are joined by two very special guests, Lonnie and Sandy Phillips, who founded Survivors Empowered, one of my favorite organizations out there.
Same.
Lonnie, Sandy, if y'all want
Hi, everybody.
So yeah, our daughter was killed in the Aurora shooting 12 years ago, almost 13 now. And we have, since that time, we've been fighting for survivors of gun violence to get their say in court, because they're banned from now because of the FLACA law. They have been, the courthouse doors have been closed to anybody that wants to sue a firearms dealer or any manufacturer. So we've gone to court over that. And because of it, I lost because of FLACA and had to file bankruptcy. But we're back, and we succeeded in getting the law in Colorado, the FLACA law in Colorado, repealed last year, which was one of the most important things that we feel like that we've done to help this movement.
We've had a bucket list of certain things that we wanted to achieve. And repealing FLACA in Colorado was huge. We want to get it repealed at a federal level, so anyone that is affected by gun violence in this country can have their day in court legitimately.
Yeah, and for those just joining us, FLACA protects the gun sellers and manufacturers from any kind of recourse if they don't do due diligence to make the guns safe or prevent dangerous people from buying them. Now, I want to throw out something like when we talk, because Brett and I often talk about laws that we could possibly pass. One I would love to actually see passed is making the lawmakers liable for not actually doing anything to actually try and prevent these events.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Yes.
You see Ted Cruz? Like,
oh my gosh, we've met with Ted Cruz. In fact, with the Uvalde, some of the Uvalde parents. We met with Ted Cruz early on, and we had put out a message to him and to John Cornyn that meet with us and talk to us about the empty chair at our Thanksgiving table, at our holiday table. And Ted Cruz was in town in San Antonio, Texas, and we had made a big enough deal of it that he pretty much had to respond. So his team called and said, Senator Cruz is in town. Can you meet with him in 15 minutes? Now, I'm sitting in my living room. I have no makeup on. My hair is absolute mess. I'm in sweats. Lonnie is not dressed appropriately. And of course, instead of saying, well, no, that's impossible, I said, absolutely. Where does he want to meet? And they were so shocked that they said, well, let us call you right back. So in the meantime, we both, changed clothes very quickly. I put some makeup on and we're ready. And the phone rings again and they said, can you make it down to such and such a restaurant within 10 minutes? Absolutely, even though it was 20 minutes away. But yes, we can make it.
Oh, and by the way, he said there'll be no
Oh, no,
cameras.
no, they didn't say it at that point. They said it later. They said it when we got there.
Yeah,
So-
we got no cameras, no recording.
No cameras, no recording. Well, in the process, they didn't say that until we got down to the restaurant. In the process of leaving home to go to the restaurant, I had called every media outlet and said, we're meeting with Ted Cruz. If you want to have your team there, and your cameras there. So we met with him. It was a total disaster. He tried lying to us and we called him out on every lie. And at the end of it, we really felt sorry for his poor assistant because I think he probably got fired in the limo on the way home to Houston. But
Yeah, Ted Cruz, he was his idea was gonna get us there and give us this thoughts and prayers bullshit.
yeah,
But it didn't work too well because every time, he said, well, have you heard about the Cruz Grassley bill? I said, yeah.
Grassley Cruz. Yeah.
I said, yeah, we've heard about it. We've read it. And it's a piece of shit bill. It expands gun rights. It allows people to take guns on trains. And we don't have that. I mean, why would we,
And
we just started tearing his bill apart
Yeah.
in front of him. And his aides were standing around listening to him. And he's looking at us like, these people know some shit.
I think he expected to come in and pat us on the head like, oh, you poor parents who've had your child taken away from you by gun violence, oh, poor babies. But it didn't go the way he had planned.
Well, this is a
And
man who
as-
blamed doors for Uvalde.
Exactly. And as he stood up to leave, we wouldn't shake his hand. And as he left, he was
Trying to
met.
interview him outside. and
He was met by
nowhere he-
cameras.
So we walked out behind him and said, oh yeah, we'd like to.
Absolutely. We're
take you
happy to talk to you. And then we go to DC and we're on the Hill and we're with a family from Uvalde. And he was a complete asshat, like he
The first thing
normally
he
is.
said to this group of there was like, 8 of us, something like that?
Yeah.
All sitting down to come talk to him about
What happened in Uvalde?
trying to get some answers. And the first thing he said to us was, gun control don't work. He said,
Wow.
what are you saying?
Well,
man?"
the first thing that happened was we walked in and he's reaching out to shake everybody's hand and I won't shake it. And Lonnie won't shake it. And he's kind of like, oh, okay, who are these people? You could see the brain working, like, who are these people? Who are these people? And we were sitting next to the couple who had lost a child in Uvalde. And they reached over to show him a picture of their child's coffin. And he just looked at it like, okay, what is this? Yeah, I mean, he was so devoid of any kind of human emotion. And that's when he said, well, gun control doesn't work. And I stood up and I walked out. And it wasn't to, okay, I've had it, or yeah, it was just like, I cannot sit here and watch him. First, he tried to disrespect Lonnie and I when we first met with him. And now he was disrespecting another couple who had lost a child in Uvalde, Texas. And it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I just could not sit there and tolerate that form of abuse, because that's what it was. It was abuse.
Well, you handled
So-
it better than I would have, because I would have looked him in the face and I was like, "Oh, so you're too stupid to understand data." That's how I would have responded.
Well, I
So-
went till the end. At the
Lonnie
end,
stayed.
we walked out, and
Yeah.
I said, I walked up and got real close to him, and just looking at his eyes, I have one question that I would just love for you to answer it honestly. Do you think President Biden is a duly elected president of this United States? And he looked at me and he was trying to think. And I said, "Oh, I see you're confused. Let me ask you again. Do you think President Biden is a duly elected president of the United States? Yes or no?" And he wouldn't answer. He didn't. And I said, "Well, okay, I guess you just answered my question," and walked out.
My
That
God,
was my last word.
He's still a senator.
yeah, he's such a tool. And yeah, if there was if politicians were held accountable for these things, the problem is that we wouldn't have a Republican Party at that point.
We
Because
don't
y'all
now.
well, that is true. That is true. But y'all saw after Uvalde, they started wearing the AR pins,
Yep.
and then after Trump was shot at, where are those pins at now?
Well, all of a sudden it's a little different. Yeah. But
So
the
that
messaging is so.
Well, I wanted to give Trump the same message that he gave in Iowa after that shooting. It was like, look at him, it's like, well, you just got to get over it, right?
Yeah.
Like, since
Get
that was
over
his
it.
response about mass
Exactly.
shootings. It's
or
like,
or
oh,
give
you
them
had 3 assassination attempts. You just got to get over it.
or give them the JD Vance, right? It's a fact of life.
It's a fact of life.
Shit
Could have
happened.
been worse.
Yeah, it could have been worse. Yes.
The Greg
All
Abbott.
of those phrases that somehow some of America, and I keep hoping it's not the majority of America, but that some of America
Well,
falls prey to.
there was a little while I was doing a helping fundraise with March for Our Lives, and we actually were selling the Thoughts and Prayers candle set for charity. To kind of like, it's like, if that's all they want to do, let's put thoughts and prayers to action.
I love it.
They smell like gun smoke and gunpowder, which is
There
also,
you
I think,
go.
fitting. I actually kind of like that smell, but yeah, the thoughts and prayers candle set, to kind of just be like an FU to all the politicians that's all they ever want to do or say.
Well, we're doing a better job of engaging gun owners. Lonnie and I were gun owners when we were in America. My son is a gun owner. It is not about gun ownership. It's about responsible gun ownership. And unfortunately, there has been no major gun violence prevention organization who has defined what responsible gun ownership is.
Right.
So it's really up to those of us who are gun owners to start defining what that looks like and taking that message from the NRA, who is now run by somebody who is really cock-a-doodle-doo. We thought it was bad before. Now it's like, whoo-hoo.
Now it's back though, like it was in the 70s, right? Like it's almost like they re-elected Harlan Carter.
Oh, I mean, it's just cray cray. And having been a gun owner since the age of 10, I had my first gun given to me to go out hunting and shooting, and went through the NRA safety course, which of course we could go on for days on that.
Yeah, in my controversial opinion, I will say that once upon a time, the NRA actually did a public good with those
Absolutely.
safety courses until they shifted fully into the lobbying machine that they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, I went through the
Eddie Eagle.
the NRA safety course at 10, which was in 1960.
I was one of the last people to go through it. I was also around 10. That was in the 80s.
Oh,
That's when it
goodness.
started getting phased out. It then
Yeah,
shifted to Eddie the Eagle.
Yeah, and I was the only girl in the class. I also outshot every one of the boys in the class. But anyway,
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. Like most women I know are better shots than most men I know. I'm just gonna say that.
Thank you.
It's the patience.
I don't know what it is other than women do have a lot of talent.
It's the steady hand, I think, right? Like women are
Steady
taught
hand,
to
yeah.
control their bodies and their motions to a degree that men are not, to the point that they're policed so much that I think women have better, like, able to steady to fire. My mother was a much better shot than my father, and my father was military. So
Wow. Now, see, both my mom and dad were excellent shooters, and they did a lot of trap and skeet.
yeah.
NRA club members, the whole bit back in the day. Um,
He was an excellent shot, don't get me wrong, but she was a
yeah,
better shot.
yeah.
A
And my mom
significantly
was
better.
pretty good too. Yeah. And we used to load our own shotgun shells, and yeah, times were good back then, because there was my father was really big on instilling that ammo stayed one place and guns stayed another, and you always made sure they were unloaded, and you always broke them down even if you were in a hunting field.
Yep.
If you weren't pointing that gun, it was broken down.
Yep. Yeah. So, like, I have been a gun owner off and on pretty much my whole life. Like, I owned a metric ton of guns before Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook was really my breaking point,
Yeah.
because, like, I've never, even before I got into what I do now with the research side of it, I never believed you could use them for self-defense. For me, it was sport. I like to go to the range. I like to trap, shoot, things like that. And then Sandy Hook happened, and America couldn't have a conversation about little children being killed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That just
Yes.
really bothered me. So I sold all of mine, and I wouldn't have bought another one until the pandemic happened, and it just got so expensive, because I would still go to the range. I would just rent a gun and pay
Yeah.
for ammunition there and do the range time. But it got to be where they were wanting to charge like $500-$600 to be at the range.
Oh
Like,
my
I could
God.
buy a gun. Yeah, because the ammunition went up, and you're only allowed to use their ammunition with
Right.
their gun.
Right. Oh
And
my.
so I became a gun owner again during the pandemic, but I had no intention. Like, my intention was, until we do something to solve this problem, like, to me, it's a toy. It's a very dangerous toy that can cause a lot of harm. But that's what it is, right? And my hobby is not worth more than the value of people's children and family members.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now with what is happening in America right this instant, I'm seeing a lot of posts from people, a lot of women saying, I'm purchasing a gun, and I want to the good thing is, the posts I'm seeing, they want to be trained, and they want to know that they're doing things right, by locking up their guns and all that, but they're fearful, and that's what we have
The stats aren't
promoted.
good. The
Yeah,
stats are good.
fear, 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 fear. So how do you protect yourself? You buy a gun,
Yeah.
and we know the outcome of that it's usually not a good outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Stats aren't good. Less than 1% of crime is stopped by a civilian with a gun. And the most of the
Absolutely.
people who stop it are off-duty law enforcement or former military. And almost all of that is property crime. Crimes like sexual assault and things like that are almost never statistically
Yeah.
stopped by a person with a firearm. And, like, even if we look at mass shootings, the vast majority of them, the shooter is either apprehended, leaves, or kills themselves, right? They aren't taken out by,
Yep. Yep.
by a person with a gun. And when it is, it's usually law enforcement, right? It's not Jim
Yeah.
Bot down the street with the gravy
No.
suits.
I had a friend that several years ago, after Jesse's death, was like, well, I have 4 AR-15s, because what about a tyrannical government? And I said, if there is a tyrannical government that takes over, and you have 4 AR-15s, what are you going to do about the drones and the rockets and the missiles? Because
Nice.
you're toast, honey. You're toast. It doesn't
Brett and
matter
I
how
have that
many
conversation.
AR-15s you have.
I
So,
think we have that
you know,
conversation every single day of the week, don't we, Brett?
Yes.
Somebody.
but the mentality of that just seems cray-cray to me.
Well,
And
I
isn't it
also
funny that they're the ones that elected the tyrannical government?
Yes.
Well, and not just that, but like our Second Amendment right doesn't give us that right. And it's also against the law, US Code 2385, to advocate the overthrowing of a government. So every single one of these people that are like, oh, I'm going to take on the tyrannical government, you just committed a felony.
Well,
Yeah.
and then the Constitution itself literally says who can regulate the well-regulated militia, right? Article 1, Section 8. So in the 10th Amendment, it says any powers not enumerated to the federal government belong to the state. Well, Article 1 is about Congress. Section 8 are the enumerated powers of Congress. And in clauses 15 and 16, it says Congress uses the militia to put down insurrections. And then in 16, it says Congress determines what you're armed with, how you're trained, what you have to do to have those weapons, what hoops you have to go through, right? So, like, it literally says, like, that, all of that. And then the Second Amendment is to give it to the states to enforce Congress's will. And for 200 years, that's how we looked at it until Antonin Scalia and the Heller decision in 2006.
Yep.
Which did not give full use of a weapon.
No.
Not they can't be used in places of worship. Or Heller said in his ruling that guns could be regulated.
Yep.
So
yeah, he flat out
that was-
says that you don't have a right to like an M16 or an AR-15, for example. And he goes on to say, if that means you can't fight the tyrannical government, oh fucking well.
Oh, well.
Yeah,
And I never thought I would see the day where I would say, where's Scalia? But here we are.
right? Yeah, Scalia verbatim said, like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose.
Yeah, I keep the Heller decision on my phone. That's how often I have to refer to it for these jackasses.
Because people don't know. Because people do not know. They think they know, but they don't know.
Oh, you'd be surprised. All the people that argue with me daily on my lives and everything, they'll be like, "Well, Second Amendment." I'm like, "All right, what are the 27 words of it?"
And they don't know.
They
Shall
don't know.
not be infringed.
Right, and I'm like, that's like 5
Shall
words.
not be infringed. Yeah, that's all. And that's where the NRA leaves it too. You know.
Well, and then like trying to explain to people like how grammar works. You'd be like, we know, right, that this nation is dumbed down now, right? And the government does that on purpose, because if you keep the ignorant, then those in power stay in power, right? And they use it against us. So if you know third grade grammar, you can read the Second Amendment and know what it's for. But it's when they take it out, when you cherry pick bits and pieces and like, oh, I'm just going to take this last bit, shall not be infringed, and run with it. Like it's just people, it irritates me when people are willfully ignorant to fit their narratives.
We have people who are willfully ignorant. We have a government who wants them ignorant. We have a government who wants them pregnant and poor. Yeah. So, when
they want you just educated enough to do a job. They want you just educated enough to do a job, but not so educated that you question why you do the job the way you do it.
Or think for yourself. Critical think.
Yeah. Well, like your state of Texas, right? Like, since everybody but me's over there, right? Like in 2012, during the Obama Mitt Romney race, the Republican Party platform of the state of Texas said to eliminate critical thinking in schools because it causes children to challenge fixed belief systems and makes them unruly.
There you go. There you go. My children got through school just in time where they did have critical thinking taught. In fact, my son in college, he got in trouble with a professor because he was challenging the professor with critical thinking. And the professor was so frustrated with him that he kicked him out of class. And my son had to go to the dean to, say, hey, this isn't right. I'm here in college to use my critical thinking skills. Am I not?
Yeah, as a professor, as long as the student's being respectful, I love those students. Those are
absolutely. And he was respectful, but he was challenging and saying, if we look at it this way, or we can look at it this way, statistics. basically. So yeah, it was, I was very proud of my son for challenging, um, going all the way up to the dean and saying, wait a minute, I'm here in college to learn to think.
Yeah.
Am I
My
not?
my my
So, yeah.
my 13-year-old did kind of the same thing. So I was on the first day of the or my second day of the of Manny and Patricia's tour this
Yeah.
past this a few months ago, and I get a call from the school saying, yeah, your son won't stand for the pledge. And I'm like, and I'm
Okay.
like, okay.
Okay.
And I'm like, is it mandatory? Like, I know it's not mandatory, right? But what happened was that the teacher was talking shit to my son, and
Ooh.
didn't know that she had called my wife and it went to voicemail. So we got the voicemail. And so she was talking shit to my son. She said, "You're just being disrespectful." And he goes, "I'm being disrespectful to who?" And she goes, "Your nation." And he said, "This nation killed my brother. How am I being disrespectful to it?" And now, grant you, he was 12 at the time. So I'm like, the schools, our education system, I love it. It needs to be better. We need to fund it more and everything. I love teachers and everything. But like, to the point, critical thinking, they try to take it away. So I'm glad that, in my house, we instill thinking. Like, I will play devil's advocate with my children all the time to give them a counterpoint and being like, all right, so let's do this. I want you to think it out. Don't take something just because I say it. Unless
Absolutely.
it's take out the trash or clean your rooms, question it. Don't question those two things, but just question everything, because I could be wrong. I'm just a human, So we do that a lot, and try to implement critical thinking, because yeah, it's being taken away. Indoctrination's coming in, critical thinking's going out, and it's
Well, I remember when Sandra Day O'Connor said, um, not having civics as a mandatory subject was going to be the downfall of the United States. And I'm paraphrasing there, but basically that's what she said. And boy, I look back to that and go, she was 100% correct. It's very easy when people do not understand the way their government works, when they do not understand how elections are held, when they do not understand how laws are made and
yep.
changed, amended, if you will. And when you do not have a populace who is taught to think, um,
No,
and then go ahead.
exactly. It's so, it's so frightening to me that Schoolhouse Rock did a better teaching of "I'm just a bill" on
Uh-huh.
Capitol Hill
Yep.
than we get in schools.
Yep.
Because I remember my government class, it was like half a semester, something like that. Um, where we learned like literally just the bare minimum. And it wasn't like really taught. It was like, okay, this is it. It was no explanation. It wasn't diving into amendments and the whole political system.
They don't want you to know.
No.
They don't want you to know. And it really, I mean, I was taught that. Lonnie was taught that. We're older, so we got that education. But it was, until Jesse was killed that all of a sudden we were like needing, and thank God we had the information, but needing that information to move forward and make a difference.
Yeah.
And I I'm angry that there are so many of us in this nation that are still willfully ignorant and think we have the answers, even though we've taken the sound bites from the Constitution, sound bites from the news, sound bites from journalism, and that's what we run with instead of real knowledge.
Yes.
And knowledge is key,
And
not
that,
sound bites, knowledge.
yeah, and no, and that, so like with me especially, so like after this happened, I did a crash course. So in the very beginning, you do the crying, you do the pleading and everything like that, and then people just don't listen. These politicians don't listen. So I'm like, I
Because
need to
they
learn.
don't care. They do
Absolutely.
not care.
So I'm like, I've got to learn how to fight back with the law, with these things. So I had to
No,
do a crash course. And I know more about politics than I ever wanted to um at this point. But it's so funny because, like I said, I do these lives every day on TikTok, teaching people and explaining things, but you wouldn't believe how many people, we call them oppositions, come up and want to tell us. They can tell us trajectory of bullets and grains and everything like that, but then when you ask them what are the three branches of government,
they don't know.
nothing.
Nada.
No clue.
Nothing.
My favorite one is how many articles and amendments are there, and they cannot tell you, but they can tell you shan't be infringed.
Can't
Like,
ban friends. No, they can't. It can't.
yeah,
Yeah.
or when
And
you
militias.
Yeah, or when
Yeah.
we try to explain to people, like, a lot of like Trump's policies as well, right? Like when he said that like he wants to burn anybody who burns the American flag is in prison for a year, which violates our First Amendment right because of Texas v. Johnson, 1989. But people will be like, oh, well, you should be because it's disrespectful. And then they want to bitch and whine and being like, oh, you muted me. You're violating my First Amendment freedom of speech. And I'm like, you don't even know what freedom of speech is. It's against your government. It's not on private platforms. So yeah, the plan is working. You keep ignorant people ignorant, and those in power stay in power. And it's completely unfortunate because if we look at other civilizations and countries and everything where the education is higher, the happiness is higher, health is higher, everything is higher because you are educated. But the US doesn't want that because the US is about the money, not the people.
Yep.
Brett, we live in Mexico now, as you know.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
we are constantly asked by people who are still in the US, do you feel safe down there? And it's like, do you remember where my daughter was killed? She was killed in a theater. Yes, we feel much safer here. They have one gun shop in Mexico, and it's run by the militia, the military, not militia, military. But the guns that do come into this country illegally are coming from America.
From the
So
US.
you tell me what is wrong. And you tell me which country is safe. I never, ever worry about walking on the streets here in Mexico. I never worry about dining in an outdoor cafe. I never worry about which way am I facing for an exit.
Yep.
I did in the US. You and I talked about it at breakfast because I put you with your back to the door so people in your community wouldn't necessarily recognize you. And we were facing the door. And I was like, in America, I feel very comfortable facing the door. I want to know what's coming. And as you know, what came were those two guys in with their Glocks coming in the door.
Yep. Yep.
Cray
Yep.
cray, cray
One
cray. It's all cray
one
cray.
100%. But yeah, it's wild to me. To just like wrap up everything that we as a country, we keep ignorance prevalent. We
Yep.
keep we keep the carrot in front of everybody as it pertains to money, and we decide that children dying, and I'm not just talking about school age children, but your child, children dying is worth less than somebody's gun. And it's
It's the
just,
number one killer of American children.
Yep.
It's the number one killer. And people will deny it and say, oh, no, that can't be true. Oh, no, that's not true. Oh, no. And it's like, no, it
Yeah.
is true.
It's the
And
leading
now
cause of
that,
death,
and
kids
now
1 to
with this,
17.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Yeah, it's the leading cause of death for children 1 to 17 for 3 years in a
Yeah.
row. This is the third year in
Yes.
a row that is true.
But with John Lott doing the criminal
Let's talk about John Lott.
data, yeah, I mean,
John
it's
Lott
going
is
to be very
discredited.
different. Well, yes, of course he's discredited, but
But-
with this new administration, he's going to have more credibility and people will believe it. And that's what's so
I'll bring up
unfortunate.
Mary Roche.
Yes, good old Mary. Yes, good old Mary. I
Yeah,
wonder how she's doing.
yeah. We'll have to ask John.
have we heard from Mary in a bit?
Like, I'm sure she'll make a
bit.
resurgence.
Well, and he wasn't even that smart about it. He made his persona to have the same amount of letters as his name. If you look at John Lott, it's 8 letters, 4 each. Mary Roche is the exact same way. He wasn't even smart about it.
Lonnie confronted him. I'll let him tell this story, but Lonnie confronted him right after Sandy Hook happened, and we were at a town hall on Pierce Morgan.
Pierce Morgan, yeah, invited John Lott as like a counterbalance to, he had a lot of survivors on the show, so he thought, we'll bring John Lott in and give him a chance to speak. And it was a fiasco for Lott. I mean, he got passed upon by every survivor there, and he would try to explain his theories, and they'd all bring up Mary Roach, and they all knew about, and he was baffled.
He was floundering.
And he would shake his head, and he'd get interrupted. I mean, they just beat him up. And so when
Commercial break.
when the broke commercial, I was sitting right behind him, and I tapped him on the shoulder. He looked at me. I said, I'm really glad that you came tonight, And he kind of, well, there's one guy here that believes in me. I said, because you really made the rest of us look really good with your stupid answer.
You made us look really smart with your stupid answers. And his expression was like, oh.
So the
It was a great moment.
the first time I saw him was when we were testifying in Texas, when they told us to be there by like 9, and then we didn't start testifying until 11 at night.
Of course.
And
that
so
wasn't deliberate, was it?
No, not at all. And so the funny part is that he came up to testify against our raise the age bill and everything. And it was I'd never heard of him before. I was still learning, but our representatives were like, haven't you been haven't they told you that you can't do published works or anything anymore because you've been found as a fraud? And then he stumbled and everything, and he was like, no. And our representative goes, well, a quick Google search says that you're lying right now, and then went through showing how he was full of it.
Yeah,
So
he can't publish in peer review anymore because of the Mary Roche thing.
Yeah, here's the unfortunate part, though. He is with this administration, he's going to have a place, and that is very worrisome, because he will lie his way through and convince the populace, again, the populace who is ill-informed, that crime is down and crime is this and crime is that, depending on what they want publicized, what the administration wants.
I just had the scariest thought. They're not going to do away with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. They're going to put him in front of it. And so he can spill the same bullshit saying more guns, less crime. which was
Yes,
the name of his book, right? Like, or
yes,
something like that.
yeah.
That's what's going to happen. And that is fucking terrifying.
There you go. That is a real possibility,
I'm
and
calling it now. I am
yeah,
calling it
yeah,
now.
you can
Yeah,
own that,
I
sweetheart.
hate to think you might be right.
Yeah, yeah. If that happens, I will give you full credit for that because you are right.
And
Scary.
that scares me even more than them taking away the Office of Gun Violence Prevention,
Yep,
is putting
me too.
him in charge. Or
Me too.
Gary Kleck.
Yep,
At least Kleck tries to be tries to be objective. He does some shit too that I don't like because he's from FSU. So I know him. And he still goes to conferences, usually to the American Society of Criminology. But Lot doesn't. Lot completely fabricates everything, right?
everything.
Right.
Clark just manipulates the data, right? And does the whole, lies, damn lies, and then there are statistics thing that Mark Twain complained about. Lot just makes it up. He just
Yeah.
fabricates it.
Yep,
Like
yep.
Gary's paper, Armed Resistance to Crime, that was published in 1995, is the most cited paper to this day from the NRA, because that's the one where he says about 2 million people use their guns to defend themselves every year. And what he did in that paper, and this is why I say he manipulates the data, is I don't remember how many people he surveyed because he wrote this survey himself. And there are two problems with it. One is the question he used. He asked, did you ever feel like you used your weapon in self-defense? And so, like, every time his paper comes up at the conference, somebody asks him, like, isn't that problematic that somebody could say it when it didn't happen? And he's like, yeah, but I don't think it happens. But the other thing that he did, and this is what I call a grievous sin because this creates a selection bias, is that only about 100, 200 people actually said they had in his data, and he collected like 6,000 people. He threw half of them away that said they did not, just threw them away. And then he did analysis on the remaining people, which then artificially inflates the percentage of people who said they did. And then he extrapolated that to be 1% of the US population in 1995, which would be like 2.5 million people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's been debunked so many times and one of our board members has taken John Lott as his personal vendetta every time he gets a chance, reams him and produces a lot of data that debunks everything he says.
And here's the problem with that. He is incredibly brilliant and incredibly bright. And the gun violence prevention movement doesn't want to hear statistics because it's an emotional issue, not a statistical issue for them. And finding that happy medium, because we do need to have those statistics. We do need to have the credibility of numbers and data, and I'm all about that. And at the same time, we need to bring the emotional side into it, and those two together will make a difference in our movement.
Absolutely.
If we can get the bigs out of the way to allow us to actually do work.
See, I do that, like I said, on my live. So I will have a background up so that people can't see behind me, and I will come and hit them with the facts and everything until, it'll be like, well, why do you care so much? Or or they want to tell me more about Uvalde than I know. Right. Which I don't think there's a single person alive that does, because that's all I do. And then I'll drop the background so that they can see, and then they can't talk. They can run their mouths this whole time, but as soon as I'm like, well, this is why I care, and I always ask them the same question afterwards, if they're somewhat civil, and I'll just be like, if you have kids, can you tell me your kid's favorite thing? Because that's what you're going to have to decide to put on their casket.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so my son loves Spider-Man, so he had a Spider-Man casket. So I want you to think about which cartoon character you would put on your child's casket, and then tell me if your hobby is more important than your children. But to
Mhm.
be fair, I get people that are like, I will ask if somebody came up to you and said, if you got rid of your firearm, that your kids would 100% be safe, would you do it? I've had people say no.
Yeah, yep, yep.
And that's the scary part.
Those,
One, that
those are
these
the
kids,
same, those are the same people that say your child was collateral damage for the 2A.
yep,
Exactly the
Charlie
same
fucking
people.
Kirk.
yep, exactly, exactly. So it's rough. That and it all goes back to the money and everything, and to the uneducated, fight a tyrannical government. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons why I do this, and I feel, I haven't ever asked y'all, but I feel like y'all would be in agreement, is that nothing that we say or do can bring our kids back, but they can protect another parent. They can make it to where the door isn't opened as easily to join our club, because this is a club that nobody wants to be in.
We want this to become a very, very private club. And you do not want to join this club. You do not want to be a member of this club. And if we can help you to prevent that membership, we're giving you a gift that you have no idea how valuable it is. You have no idea. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what any new member of this club, I look at my friend who's been in this for over 30 years. And I look at all the people that I've met along the way and that I've opened my mind and my heart to their experiences and what they've lived through. And it's all the same. It is wanting to prevent you out there, wherever there is, from knowing this beyond pain, this devastation, this daily trauma that we move through, and try to make sense of. Sorry, over here. Try to make sense of, and there's no sense of it, and it can all be avoided. It can all be. This does not have to be the way we live. And
Exactly.
it can be avoided, it can be curtailed, it can be stopped. When we first joined Brady back in 2013, January of 2013, when we first joined Brady, which was a very short-lived relationship, but they said to us that their goal was to reduce gun violence by 50% in 10 years. Well, what happened in 10 years? It increased. It increased.
Yep.
We went from 30,000 people being killed a year to 50,000 being killed a year. And if we take just the people who have died by gun violence since Jesse died, we are over 500,000 people.
Yep.
500,000 people in the United States of America. That is astounding and disgusting.
Yes.
But those numbers don't really affect people. They don't get it. I mean, to them, it's not enough. I mean, how many is enough?
How many is enough? Exactly. And there is no answer to that because America is divided.
Yeah, I don't think there is an answer to that. I think that like we have with Sandy Hook and Uvalde, and were the ones where the little kids died, right? Like we literally said that it never will matter, that we don't actually care, right? Because it's easy for people to justify older people when they're caught in these kind of horrific events, because they'd be like, well, if they weren't there or whatever. But like kids at school is really hard to like try and find excuses for, And that's when you end up with people like Charlie Kirk who are saying, well, that's just the price of freedom.
Yeah, I'm glad my son was the price of freedom for all you
And my
assholes
daughter,
out there.
and yes, and all the other souls out there that um just were living. And this is the other thing that pisses me off when they say, well, she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Your son was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were in school, they were in the movie theater, they were in a church, they were shopping, they were living their daily lives. How is that being in the wrong place at the wrong time? The wrong place at the wrong time was the gun being in the hands of somebody who shouldn't have it. The
Exactly.
access, it's all about the access. Oh,
Yeah.
you could really get me going.
Yeah, the ease of access. That's what I say all the time. And a lot of people, so I'll ask the question like, well, how do we, if we don't want to do anything, how do we protect our schools? Right. And they'll tell us armed guards and metal
Yeah.
detectors. And I'm like, so we want to regulate our children. We want to take away their constitutional rights because we are not adult enough to regulate ourselves. How does that make sense?
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Absolutely perfectly said. We have to have armed guards at our schools for children to go in and just simply live their lives and learn as children. It's insane. It's insanity.
And then I always have to tell them, yeah, how many officers are at Uvalde?
Uh-huh.
And how long did they wait outside? So it
Uh-huh.
didn't work.
Yeah. My son, I did tell you that. My son
Yeah.
responded to Uvalde.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and they just had a training course just a few months before that the shooting happened. They were going through a course to train how to stop it, and it didn't work. It did not work. A good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy. I mean, 100 police officers couldn't
No,
stop
400.
one.
400.
Yeah.
400.
Yeah.
400 plus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's three
Insanity.
376 to be precise. But yeah, it's and that's the thing too. I know the breakdown, right? I know that there was
Yeah,
92
you've got the
DPS.
figures.
There was 26, city officers. There were 5 school officers, 181 border patrol. Like, and these are all numbers that have been like burned into my head because of the amount of time that I spend just researching
Sure.
and watching
Sure.
and I watch when I get new videos, I play them on the internet so other people can see, but I constantly watch and I go over it and everything, trying to find any little piece.
Okay, Brent, I'm going to say something that you won't like.
What's
I
that?
worry about you doing that. And I worry about you finding a balance to that, because that's a rabbit hole that is so dark and so debilitating that I hope that you will find a balance to that is also healthy and good um, and honoring Uzi in a different way.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
this is Mama. This is Mama talking to you now, and you can tell me to shut the F up.
no, and I appreciate that. And the only way that I can really describe it for me is that the fight,
Yep.
the learning and the fight is what truly keeps me going. So I do like yesterday, I took off. I didn't do anything. I played Madden with my son and everything like that. Now that, there are times where I'm like, no, I got to work. I got to work. I got to work. But then, when I take a second, I sit and my kids are like, oh, hey, I want to do this. It's like, yeah, we're going to do this. Fuck all of this for the day,
And that's finding that balance. And there will be a time, as time goes on, that balances, it begins to shift,
Mm.
and that's okay, because I know when it began to shift for us, that it was like, oh, but we're not honoring Jesse. We're not, but it was just a shift, and it didn't mean that we weren't honoring her. It didn't mean that we weren't still interested in the work. It wasn't that we were still devoted to the work. It just meant that there was a shift from that constant, and you're still in the constant, to the not so constant, but still priority. And
Right.
it will always be your priority, but it doesn't need to be the constant emotional devotion
Right.
that you currently have. And that is normal, and it's okay, and it's the progress, and it will still be honoring Uzi, and you will still be involved to the point that you need to be, and will continue to be. We have friends, I don't know if you know this name, but Tom Mauser from, Tom, or of him. He was a lone wolf back in the day, truly the only voice out there in Colorado after Columbine, and the work that he has done through these years. But it's ebbed and it's flowed, and it's ebbed and it's flowed, and he's still there after all these years because of that. So I don't want to see you burn out. I don't want to see other people that I love and care about from other shootings burn out. But it's finding that balance and finding that ebb and flow, and I want that for you, because your
Yeah.
voice is incredibly important.
And we are approaching the end of the show. So did you want to add anything else, Lonnie or Sandy, before Brett and I make our final thoughts?
Well, it's great that you're doing this and you're putting the information out and letting people, digest it however they want. But the fact is that we have a problem in this country, and Sandy and I are trying to help those that are most affected. And we could use any help that you can give us. survivorsempowered.org. There's a donate button there. If you think that we might someday hopefully not have to use our services, but we're planning to get our toolkit in every mayor's office in major city in the country, so that they will have them to give out, even though they won't let us see them face to face.
Here's the deal. It's not a matter of if it happens, but when it happens. And we know that from the smallest communities, Uvalde, to the largest communities of, let's say Buffalo or Parkland or whatever. Las Vegas is a good example. We're all affected by this.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Brett, you want to make some closing, take like 2-3 minutes, and then I'll wrap her up.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate how important Survivors Empowered is. Like I said, I wish I would have been able to get it in the very beginning. But our city just doesn't give a shit. But the information that is in that Survivors Toolkit is just, it's irreplaceable. It's invaluable, because this is stuff that really, really, truly helps. You have a bunch of organizations come in, in the first few days of these massacres and everything like that. And we talked about it earlier, where you go into a room and there's 30 different things, but you just want somebody to talk to. Even subconsciously, you just want somebody that can tell you, you will survive. You're not going to like it. It's going to suck. It's a half-life, but you will survive. Instead of people telling you, oh, well, I can't imagine, because you will imagine. just to expound upon on what Sandy just said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Whether you yourself are a victim, whether someone that you love is a victim, because the gun violence rate is steadily climbing because of the ease of access of these weapons. So what I like to always say is fight against gun violence when you're on your side, because when you're on the side that I'm on, that Sandy and Lonnie are on, it's a whole lot harder to fight. A whole lot harder to fight. So I encourage everybody to go to survivorsempowered.org, read everything, click the survivors toolkit. This isn't just for like mass shootings either. This is for all gun violence. And even not gun violence, like anything. It literally tells you, it helps you step by step in understanding, the grieving process and the anger and everything like that. So it is an invaluable resource that I think everybody in this country needs to have.
Yeah. All right. And for my final
Thank you.
thoughts, I want to add that organizations like Survivors Empowered shouldn't exist, right? Like, we shouldn't wake up every day to these types of mass tragedy events. We should not have this be a debate. Children's lives, people's lives, because being lost to gun violence should not be a political issue. It should not be a debate. But thank God that your organization is there, because it is there to help people deal with something that is unimaginable, that is something that no parent, no family member should ever have to deal with. And without an organization like yours, there's no one there, because we've mentioned Brady, we mentioned Giffords, we mentioned Everytown tonight, March for Our Lives. None of those other organizations like show the survivors how do you get through your day to day. None of them do that. They all focus on, let's make radical change to the gun laws to save people's lives, and that's important. We need to do that, right? But there is also this other part of it, this other element. And so that's where I'm going to land my plane. And so for those of you listening, thank you so much for hanging around. This has been Stories from the Cold Dead Hands. Maybe there will come a day where we will have no more stories to tell. But until then, signing off.
This has been Stories from the Cold Dead Hands with Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow and Brett Cross. Hopefully one day we will not have any stories to tell. But until that day arrives, remember to love one another and be kind to each other. Until next week, signing off.